All right, it's the Big Douglas Show. This is a super Monday. If you think you saw him twice, that's right. Nick Eckridge is back while the guys are out touring and jet setting around the world. So every day until he's ready to leave, Nick will be joining us each Monday. Our guest today from Team 980 is Kevin Sheehan. Kevin, thanks so much for giving us some time today.
What's up, Doug? How are you?
Doing great, man. It is football season. We've actually got a little bit of stuff to talk about. Before we do that, Kevin, we've been playing a little bit of trivia on Monday. I've got a list of commanders. I'm curious if you know where they went to school. We'll start with.
Are you talking about like players on the team right now? Actual commanders?
Actual commanders.
Okay, go ahead.
Just now. Start out with a couple of easy ones. We've run through a lot of them, so there's not a ton of tough ones left. Freebie here, Montez Sweat.
He would be Mississippi State.
Nick, let's go Kendall Fuller.
Virginia Tech.
Yep, Virginia Tech.
Charles.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was for Nick.
That's all right.
We were, ringing in.
I need a buzzer.
I thought you were going to create a competition here.
We will next time.
All right, sorry.
Charles Leno.
Who's that for, me?
Sure, go for it.
Leno Jr. Did Nick just give the answer?
I don't know it.
Is it a Big Ten school?
I gotta move my conferences around now. It's located in the in the middle of the country. How about that?
Nebraska?
No.
Is it a Big Ten or is it a Big 12 school?
It's a Big 12, I believe. How about this? His quarterback in college is the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys.
You're breaking up.
Oh, Boise State.
It is Boise State.
Okay.
Boise State.
You were breaking up there. I missed all that.
I think you're breaking. Yeah, I think that might be your connection.
Here you go.
I don't. You might have to jump out and come back in, Kevin.
I can't hear your volume, and my mic is open. Volume's up.
Yeah, I don't know. We heard you, and then we. Yeah, well, I got you, but it sounds crazy in the background. Leave the studio and then come back in. I think is your best bet.
Boise State. I would have never guessed Boise State.
Yeah, me neither when I looked it up. Let's see. And the last one I had here is Kaliki Hudson.
Oh, Michigan, right?
It is Michigan.
Yeah.
I guess he's going to get the first crack at, I don't know, they call it, maybe it's the Sam linebacker for them, Buffalo.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
I have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, they don't use three linebackers a lot on the field at the same time, so you'll see a lot of Davis and Holcomb. But yeah, I guess he would get the first shot at it because I don't know who else is behind him really.
It's interesting because I know that they were super high on him when they drafted him. I kind of was too.
Yeah, he's a good special teams player. So
he hasn't quite developed into what I think they were hoping for. Maybe they think he will. Here, Kevin, can you hear? You got us now?
I got you now. I totally lost your volume. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, it might have been a Wi-Fi type thing. You never know when you're in the mobile office.
Yeah, exactly.
The question was Charles Leno. Any idea where Charles Leno went to school?
So you left off Big 10 or Big 12. Which league? You said middle of the country.
Yeah, it's Big 12, I think.
I don't know, Oklahoma.
It was Boise State. I'm probably, where was Boise State?
Boise's not in the Big 12.
They have Pac-10 schools.
They're also not in the middle of the country. That would be the Mountain Time Zone.
Boise, Idaho is not in the. Yeah. Boise, Idaho doesn't run down
I would consider that Rocky Mountain closer to west than middle of the country.
They do if the middle of the country is a very large middle.
That's why I'm not a geographer. That's why I'm not.
All right.
Let's move on. We wrapped with Kaliki Hudson. Do you know where Kaliki Hudson went to school?
Khalif Hudson. Is that for Nick or me?
Nick actually said it while you were logging back in.
It's a Big Ten school.
Did he go to Indiana?
Michigan.
There you go.
All right.
right.
Listen, it is
That was fun.
Sort of. This week we're doing defense. Before we get the coming, I got just a couple of random questions for you. Looks like Doc Walker will take Theismann's spot. And did you see that?
You mean on the preseason games?
Is that a preseason only and not a regular season thing?
Well, Theismann didn't do the regular season games. He just did the preseason TV games. Has it been announced?
Yes, Logan Paulson on the sideline and Doc on in color with Kenny Albert.
Wait, who's on the sideline?
Logan Paulson.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if it had been announced yet. No, I'm excited. It'll be great to have Doc doing the preseason games.
Absolutely. Kevin, we're back to the Curtis Samuels on the side field. Is this a big thing, or you believe them when they're just saying they're being super cautious?
Yeah, it's a big thing because of what Rivera said. You know, he called it conditioning, football conditioning. Their new injuries, hamstring, lower back. You know, this is a guy that had surgery that said, you know, everybody said it was going to be okay. And first few days of camp, like when he was limited, I'm like, why is this guy being limited if he's 100% healthy? You know, it's one thing to be cautious when a guy is, you know, injured or, you know, they're concerned. But when the bottom line is when you limit somebody, you're concerned. We found out today why they're concerned. You know, there's plenty of time. We got 6 weeks until the opener, but sure, you should be concerned after what happened last year that we're about to go into Curtis Samuel round 2.
They, by all accounts, they got the Kerrigan thing right. They had stumbled all over themselves over easy ones. Nice to have Kerrigan back. Were you surprised about this with Kerrigan, the retirement, and then, I mean, frankly, how well they didn't botch it, right?
I didn't even think about it from that perspective that they didn't botch it. What was there to botch? I mean, they just signed him to a 1 day honorary. You mean they could have said no? I guess they could have said no.
They could have spelled his name wrong in the press release.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they could have done a London Flechter thing. You know, I think it's great. I think it's great that he wanted to do it here. You know, I think that says something about. But you know, he wasn't going to do it in Philadelphia. He was there for a year and barely even played. I think the thing with Ryan is great player. Certainly in his generation of Washington Redskins football team players, one of the best, you know, but he's not the greatest pass rusher in franchise history. You know, Dexter Manley is that. You know, the conversation for number 2, maybe he would be in, but I'd probably take a couple of guys before him. But he was an excellent player, just not, you know, he'll be on the next 10 for the 90-year anniversary. He'll be in the ring of honor one day, but he's not a jersey retirement conversation. You know, you don't talk about Ryan Kerrigan from that standpoint, but a really good player who was a great teammate, always available, and one of the stars of a real down era.
Down era is one way to put it.
Down era sums it up pretty nicely. No, I mean, I always love Ryan Kerrigan. Always count on him. Never a problem with him, which is very tough to say about a lot of those other teams. So love me some Ryan Kerrigan.
He wasn't explosive, but he was a grinder.
Yeah. He's very, very good at what he did.
And consistent.
He was really good at one thing more than anything else. And I remember Bill Parcells saying this the day he was drafted, and I forget who Parcells was working for that day, whether it was the NFL Network or ESPN, but he said, Ryan Kerrigan's my favorite player in this draft, the 2011 draft, because he's got a knack for making plays. We saw it in the first game he played, kind of reading screen, anticipating, picking off Eli Manning, returning it. He was always around the ball, forced 26 fumbles, something that I think he led the nation in when he was at Purdue. And that's what he did well. Like, he had a real feel for the game and the ability to anticipate. He just wasn't super explosive as a pass rusher, not a fear-inducing game wrecker, that JJ Watt was, who the Skins could have selected at number 10 in that draft, but traded back with Jacksonville to 16.
Let's see, Kevin. Terry got paid. Who do you think's next to get a big payday?
You said Terry?
I said Terry got his big
Terry.
payday. Who's next?
I guess it's not going to be Duran. So
let's do that real quick. What does Duran have to do to get the big payday? You think there's anything he can do this year to get it?
Play up to his potential consistently. He's flashed, and he's had moments where you think, wow, he can be a dominant interior defensive lineman, but he hasn't done it consistently, and I think that's what they have a problem with. And, why not? I don't know. There are a lot of things that we don't know outside of watching games about the personality, about how much he loves football. I'm not suggesting that that's the issue, but there's so many things that we don't know that they know. I guess he could go out and dominate and be consistent, and then they could use the franchise tag on him a year from now. They don't have to use it on Terry now. But I would bet that Montez Sweat is the next one, in the crosshairs of a new deal.
They've still got the 5th-year option for him, right? That kicks in next year,
right? And
Holcomb
too. Yeah, good one.
Is ready. I think we talked about this last week, right? Nick, Cam Curl's not eligible for another year.
Right. Yeah. I think he was the next year. He was after Holcomb.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anything Payne can really, because I think if he does flash that potential that we all saw, I don't know if we'd be able to offer him the biggest contract that he would want. I mean, if he shows how dominant he could be, I just don't know if we can offer that with Sweat and Young coming up. So I don't know. I don't know what he can do. I think they found his replacement, and I think we'll just kind of see how it goes this year. And might be the last one.
Kevin, are you hearing anything about what that Chase Young timeline actually looks like? We've heard a bunch, but I'm curious what you've heard.
I mean, really just what Rivera said the other day, which is, he kind of told you with his first answer, he thought the PUP list was 6 games, and he said it. 6 games PUP list. And it's not 6 games, it's 4 games. And then he backed off of that and said, well, I just know he's going to be out for the first game. I think, there's reason to believe that Chase Young's going to miss the early portion of the schedule.
Does that then make the defensive line depth a problem in your mind?
Well, yeah. I mean, they had some depth at D end anyway. Their depth issue was whether or not Phil Matthews develops into, Tim Settle and Matt Ioannidis, or one of the two. I think the bigger issue is just that if this year is a massive year, which it is for the organization from a business standpoint, I don't know if it is for Ron Rivera from a job standpoint, but it is from a reputation standpoint. They need their most talented players to play to their top levels. And Chase Young is arguably the most talented player on the team. And if they don't, and now the expectations for his 2022 season are eliminated. You really can't set expectations for a guy that's had no off season, no ability to do anything, prior to the first time he takes the field, which may not be until October. So I think the bigger issue is, without Chase Young on the field having a chance to redeem himself for what was a disappointing sophomore season, that's one of your A players that isn't going to, more likely than not, play 17 games at an A level. And so that impacts your ability to win 9, 10, 11 games and have a really good season.
Completely agree. The follow-up, I guess, to that is, are you then surprised that they basically just ran it back? I mean, that's the same defensive staff, the same play caller. You haven't added any pieces at all on the defense. Didn't draft anybody of note. I mean, I know people are high on Percy Butler, but it's not the same thing as taking Kyle Hamilton in the first. So I agree with you on how big of a year this is. Are you surprised they just ran it back on defense?
I don't know. I mean, I've thought about, could he have? The thing is about Del Rio, the players like him. They think he's a good coach. I think Ron believes he's a good coach. I think if you talk to most people in the league, they would say Jack Del Rio is a competent defensive mind and coach. And by the way, a guy that, gets a lot out of his players. Last year was a disaster, though. You can't forget it. But their strength is still their D-line, even with the 2 lost interior tackles. They didn't do much at linebacker. We got a lot to learn about that, and they got a lot of work to do in the secondary. It's funny, I've said this before, but teams that don't have an elite quarterback, the narrative on those teams or the expectations change so often, so frequently. Last year, we thought the defense is the strength. We're not sure about the offense. A year later, we're kind of confident about the offense, but we're not really sure about the defense. That happens to almost every team that doesn't have the elite quarterback, where you have consistency year in and year out about what you're expecting the team to be overall. And that's where Washington's been for 30, plus years, is without an elite quarterback. And so the conversation changes, year to year, and many times, month to month, week to week.
Nick, if we assume that, I believe the team was in near the top 5 of third down efficiency, at the bottom at the worst. If we assume that they just can't be that bad again, and that the pressure or the lack thereof at the quarterback changes, you think that's part of the reason that they just looked at the tape and said, it's an anomaly. We can't be that bad and just.
The schedule last year, it played a huge part. When you're playing the number 1 schedule from winning the division, it's going to be extremely tough because of all the quarterbacks you had to face. So it'll be easier from a schedule standpoint. And I think they were better down the back stretch when they got William Jackson back healthy, when they were able to move Fuller back outside. I think if you can fill that slot role with St. Juice, and if he could step in, I think you have a very good defense. I'm not worried about the D-line. I think Sweat will be as good as he was before. Jonathan Allen can still produce. Deron Payne, we've seen flashes. I'm worried about the linebackers if one of those 2 go down. They just did nothing to address the depth at linebacker. I just don't know what to expect if either of those 2 go down. But I think overall, in another year, that system with all of them playing together and just kind of trusting each other more, I think it'll definitely be better, and the schedule will definitely help.
Kev, you think that by week 1, Landon Collins will be back on the squad?
I don't know. Maybe he's out there. I think the fact that nobody has signed him at this point may be an indication of what other teams think. I'm actually surprised at that. But back to something Nick said, last year they faced really murderer's row in terms of quarterbacks and offensive personnel, and they couldn't get off the field on third down. They were 31st out of 32 teams, and that was huge. This year, what's interesting is last year a lot of people have pointed to, they were good against the run. Well, they played a lot of teams that threw the ball against them and did it effectively. This year, they're playing a lot of really good rush offensive football teams. Philly twice, Dallas twice, San Francisco, Tennessee, Cleveland. I think I went through it recently, and it's like they play 9 games out of their 17 against the top 8 rush offenses from last year. And by the way, that can change year in and year out about the teams being great rush offenses one year, not the next. But these are teams that are intent on running the football. Cleveland, by the time you get to them, and Deshaun Watson is playing maybe a little bit different, but we know San Francisco wants to run it. Philly wants to run the football. So rush defense this year, I agree with Nick. I'm confident in the D-line, but I'm not confident in what they have in overall the front 7 because of what they have at linebacker. Rush defense is something to watch closely, because forget what their numbers were last year. They weren't playing the same type of teams that they're scheduled to play this year. They're going to have to stop the run, or they're going to be on the field too much.
Yeah, and Jamin Davis is is key to that because he struggled a lot last year in just being in the right gap. Like he just struggled to be in the right gap. And obviously a year of experience in an off season to kind of work on that. If he can be better there, and I see a big improvement because coverage, he's fine athletically and be able to kind of, work through coverages and stuff like that. But in the run game, he was just constantly in the wrong gap and just overplaying things and just in his own head too much. So, I mean, if you could see Davis just kind of take a step up mentally, then I think you could see a huge jump.
Yeah, well, maybe not having the responsibilities that come with playing middle linebacker will help.
Just free his mind up. Like, just don't let him think so much and just let him use his athleticism. Just be like, hey, you're in this gap, stay here. Like, don't have to just read your run keys, read the guards, and work off that.
In their gap scheme system, there was a lot of discussion of that. And then at the end of the year, and maybe you saw this, Nick, too, they said he was starting to get it more.
Yeah, he was definitely better at the end of the year.
As they all were too, right? Because I think William Jackson said he started getting it a little bit more at the end, and then the communications between McCain and Curl. I'm curious, fellas, you have more confidence in that D line or the quarterback room? Because the cornerback room is very thin. They've got St. Juice back in the slot. I don't know that he's a slot guy. I kind of always thought he was better at the boundary where he could use the sideline to help him. And frankly, who's the quarterback if one of them goes down? So I guess the question is, who do you have more confidence in, the D-line or the cornerbacks?
Definitely D-line. Has to be D-line. I mean, even without Chase Young for a while, I think it's still – what you have there. I just don't know what you can expect from the slot. I do like St. Juice just based off of his length and his body type. He struggled in a couple games last year, but – other than 2 games, he was pretty solid. I think week 1 and 8 were his worst games, and he really struggled. But other than that, he was fine. I just think you get a better unit basically, and just like you said, the end of last season they were much better. You don't see as many coverage busts. I like McCain. I like Curl. Will Jackson was much better, and I think you can trust them more. But there's still a lot of question marks with that slot and maybe having to move Fuller back in there. And we all saw that he kind of struggled with that. So, yeah, I think it's the D-line.
Yeah, that's my answer too. And on St. Juice, I like him a lot. I like his size. I like his length. But, Doug, I'm with you a little bit. Like, I'm a little bit he just, to me, looks more like an outside corner than a slot corner. But we really haven't seen him do it enough to judge it. They're doing that. We've seen Fuller obviously play that. There was all the conversation during the offseason about how a lot of their DBs weren't available for some of the voluntary stuff in the offseason, and somehow that led to their terrible defensive year. Well, there's no excuse this year with the secondary because everybody was there from the beginning. So there's a little bit of pressure on Del Rio and company to get off the field on 3rd down and have a much better year with their secondary and their communication, specifically in their secondary. And I think they like some of the guys they have, but I'm with you on St. Juice. To me, big, long, rangy. It's going to be interesting to see if he actually lines up as their slot corner, as their primary slot corner. I'm interested to see what that looks like.
And if he's used in this Buffalo nickel role, I mean, maybe he's out there covering tight ends with his size instead of receivers out on the boundary. To me, that's kind of like the biggest question mark of camp. Is do they have a nickel corner? Who is this Buffalo nickel that I think we all get wrapped up a little too much of? I think in Carolina it was a linebacker. Here it was a safety. I think a corner like St. Juice could fill the role. But to me, that's the biggest one on defense. Nick, what is your biggest question mark on the defense now that camp started?
I think it's the nickel corner, like you said, and then I think it's the depth at linebacker. If Holcomb goes down, I don't know what you have. Like, Holcomb, you can trust to be consistent and solid. He's not the greatest linebacker, but he's good enough to be a starting linebacker in the NFL. But if he goes down, I don't know what you have behind him. I mean, you have Jamin Davis and Yeah, that's it. I just don't know. No
well, you
depth
have that
whatsoever.
great Michigan standout. I don't know if you guys knew that Khaleke Hudson went to Michigan. You know
That
what's
was
funny about
Indiana.
Hudson? They loved him last year.
Yeah.
Before camp started, I thought he was going to get many more snaps based on the conversations I had. They liked him a lot last year. Maybe they still think he's got a shot.
It's funny, Kevin, because when you had to log on earlier, when we were talking, waiting for you to get back on, I said the same thing. Like, the team has been high on Khaleke Hudson since they drafted him, and I thought because that's what he did in college, right? He played that Viper, they called it Viper at Michigan. I thought he was going to get a lot more snaps last year, but in the game time that he had, he didn't look great. So again, I'm interested to see what happens here. The other guy I'm interested in, and maybe that's just because I've been a fan since college, but James Smith-Williams to me has a chance to really take another jump. I mean, he's one of these huge RAS score guys, right? He's an athletic freak. It's funny. They have been other than this draft, the previous drafts they have taken
7th rounders.
Yeah, with huge, RAS scores and athletic profiles, and I guess I call it lumps of clay that they hope to mold. It's funny because this draft, I said no swinging for the fences. They just slapped singles and doubles all over the place. It's an interesting way they corrected their drafting, or not corrected, but just changed their drafting this season compared to the last couple. Where does this roster rank in your mind, Kevin, of the last 5 or 6 years? I mean, are we heading in the right direction? Do we have an overload of talent on the team?
Well, there's not an overload of talent. I mean, that's not the way I would describe it. I think offensively, their skill position players, if healthy, big if, it's as good as they've had here in a while. I mean, the Jackson, Pierre, Jordan, Chris Thompson, having a top half of the league starting quarterback was pretty good. 2016, they were really a good offensive football team. I think still the biggest question mark everywhere, and it's the mystery of the upcoming season is Carson Wentz. I mean, don't bury the lead, right? It's like if he plays at the level that he played at in 2017, and shows, plays to the level of talent that, many people have thought that he was capable of playing at various points in his career, they're going to be a good football team and they're going to compete for a playoff spot. If he's not that, they're not going to be very good, and they're going to have to start from scratch next off season at quarterback.
I remember texting with you a couple of years ago when I thought they were going to draft Justin Fields. They didn't. Are you surprised that they haven't? Like, I think of Garoppolo and I think of Wentz, and I think maybe they get you into the first round of the playoffs, but are they quarterbacks that elevate you? Are you surprised that they haven't gone out and tried to get a young quarterback that has potential to take you to the next level? Or are we kind of just stuck in this? I hate to call it purgatory because we've been in it 7, but I mean, even if you win a playoff game with Wentz, if he's not the long-term answer, I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, you got to love a guy to take him. I do think that they liked Fields, but maybe didn't love him enough for the price that Chicago paid to New York to move up.
Which wasn't a big price.
No, not really. But you got to love a guy. You got to believe that it's the guy. And if not, you got to address it the way they tried in 2021 with the trading, the attempted trade for Matt Stafford. And in this past offseason with the attempt to go get Russell Wilson. Those were legitimate attempts to get, top 10 quarterbacks. And, if they'd gotten Stafford, would he have had the success that he had in LA last year? Probably not. It's not the same coaching staff. It's not the same offensive personnel. There's no Aaron Donald on the team or others that were on that team. If they had Russell Wilson with this group, would I feel more confident than I do with Wentz? Definitely. Like if they had pulled off the deal for Russell Wilson with Terry being signed, the drafting of Dotson, who I'm a fan of, hopefully Logan coming back, the 2 backs, maybe the 3 backs, Curtis, Diami, etc., they would have had a chance to be really, really good offensively. That chance exists, but it's got to include Wentz playing at 2017 or something resembling, high-end quarterbacking, top half of the league quarterbacking.
Or even the first 9 games from last year, right? I mean, Nick, those were the first half of his season last year were good, right?
They were, but Nick will talk about that. I mean, he probably will tell you that some of the overall traditional numbers may be a little bit misleading in terms of the year he had.
A little bit. He was very, very skittish.
Super high. Nick's not super high, I don't think, on Carson Wentz. I think I can say that on his behalf.
I love quarterback play, and he makes it look like it's pulling teeth watching him try to play the quarterback position. And sometimes it works out incredibly, and sometimes you are literally pulling teeth out. And it's not fun to watch stylistically, if that makes sense.
You know what? God, I forgot to mention this morning. So I went back. I was looking for at all of Ryan Kerrigan's interceptions. He only had 3 interceptions in his career. All 3 returned for touchdowns. The last one came in the 2017 opener at FedEx against Philadelphia. I'm sorry, the 2020 opener that they lost. No, 2017 opener. It was the game they lost 30-17. And Kerrigan had a pick 6 in that game. So as I found that highlight, I just started watching some of the game to watch what Wentz looked like. He was so inaccurate at times. And I those are some of the things that you kind of forget, because you look at 27-7, and it's Carson Wentz. I think the biggest issue he has is what Nick said. Some of the decision-making is head scratching, in every year. But he really struggles at times with the easy throws from an accuracy standpoint. So that's something to keep an eye on, because I think they're going to have to throw the ball deep. They're going to have to air it out. Hopefully they can run it a little bit, but it's about getting the ball this year into Dotson and McKissick and Gibson and Terry's hands and letting playmakers make plays.
And he struggled with easy decisions too. Like, I mean, I just count so many times where it's just an easy pass is wide open that will get you 7-8 yards on first down. Instead of that, it's scrambling out of the back of the pocket and eventually having to throw it away. But yeah, easy decision making, easy passes. Just be easy, be smart, and that's been his toughest thing for the past couple of years.
Let's wrap with this. I thought it was interesting. Terry said that the signing Wentz definitely weighed on his decision to re-sign. Kevin, if I asked you to bet today, I think there's a better chance that Wentz is here again next year, or they're back to looking for a quarterback.
You gonna give me odds? Can I get like a plus 200 on him not being the quarterback in 2023? I'll bet that.
I take
even
that.
Money. I don't know. I mean, it's probably even money. He's probably a slight favorite to return because they don't have anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless they, Hal ends up being the answer. But I'm not overly optimistic about Carson Wentz being the long-term answer. I mean, I'll answer it that way. Is he back in 23? There's a chance. Do I think he's the answer long-term as like an upper half, consistent, top 12-ish, top 14-ish kind of quarterback? I'm not confident in that at all. I think if that were the case, he'd still be in Philadelphia or Indianapolis.
Yeah, Philly was interesting. New head coach, new GM. Indianapolis is interesting. It was obvious that the owner.
Yeah, but the GM didn't want him either, Doug. That's the whole Irsay thing. I mean, Ballard didn't want him. And Philadelphia took the largest salary cap hit in the history of the NFL to get him out of their building. So I think there's a lot of revisionist history on both of these things from a lot of people in the fan base that are really wanting it to work out and love sort of biting back at those that are kind of realistic about it. But if he were all that, he'd still be in Indianapolis. And no matter what the owner said, Reich and Ballard would have gone to the mat to keep him there, even if it was Irsay being irked over his vaccination status. Or if he really was the star kind of quarterback, he'd still be in Philadelphia. They wouldn't have taken that salary cap hit to deal him. So you got to always look at those things as two decent organizations that said no. And in Indy's case, said no without an answer. They didn't even have a quarterback when they dealt him. They didn't know Matt Ryan was going to be available. So I don't ignore those things. But with respect to this year, he's better than what they've had. That's for sure. And so because of that, they may be a better team offensively. It's a low bar to clear, but I think they'll clear it.
Vegas still has the Commanders at 7.5 on the win total. I would assume you're taking the over on that.
Yeah, I like the over a little bit on that. I don't love it, but I like it a little bit. I think they have the potential to win 8 or 9 games.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing.
All right, fellas. Nick, I'll see you next Monday. Kevin, I know you were wrapping up your podcast right before you hopped on with us. What were you guys discussing on that, Jewel?
Had Michael Phillips on talking about the Curtis Samuel stuff from today and more. And then Jimmy Patsos, who is one of my good friends and one of the more interesting and great guests you can have to talk about anything. From Rick James's greatest hits all the way through the Battle of the Bulge up and through the great Celtic teams. I had him on to talk about Bill Russell's passing. Jimmy grew up in Boston and was a huge Celtic fan, and so it was great to catch up with him, as always.
I lied. One more before we get you out of here because you said it. Do you think the Wizards will make any moves this summer? You think they'll actually pull in Spider, or this is a bunch of nonsense?
I mean, Donovan Mitchell would be great. I mean, Durant would be the all-time, and I would trade everything and that I have. I mean, Beal's got the no trade clause, but if I'd trade the entire team other than Beal to bring him here, and I'd trade Beal too, but Beal's got can stop that from happening. But yeah, I mean, you get Kevin Durant on your team, and you're an automatic contender. They've not been a contender literally for 43 years. I mean,
it would get me to watch.
Never been considered a contender.
I gave up on the Wizards a long time ago, but it would get me to watch again if Kevin Durant came back.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
No chance. All right, fellas. I appreciate you. And Kevin, we'll talk to you down the road, buddy. I appreciate your time today.
Good to see both of you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
See you guys.